Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We've cracked the top 15 in our schedule previews of our way too early top 25 teams. And today we're taking a look at the 15th ranked Wisconsin Badgers, who had a fantastic bounce back season in 2019 after a fairly disappointing 2018 campaign. Paul Chryst led the Badgers to a 10-4 record, including an appearance in the Big Ten championship game and a Rose Bowl appearance. Unfortunately, the Badgers lost both of those games to Ohio State and then a 1-point loss to Oregon in that Rose Bowl thriller. Now they have to prepare for life without Jonathan Taylor, their workhorse running back, who finished second all-time in rushing yards at Wisconsin with 6,174 rushing yards in his career. It's going to be a very, very difficult player to replace. Luckily, they do return their quarterback in Jack Cohn, who I thought played fantastic in his first year as a starter. Really, to me, exceeded expectations. And he does return Jake Ferguson at tight end, one of the best in the Big Ten, and Wisconsin will once again boast a very, very solid defense, returning 9 starters from a defense that allowed just 16.9 points per game last year. Per usual, Wisconsin is going to be very strong defensively. If they can work out some things offensively, this team not only has a chance to win the Big Ten West again, but could very well win the Big Ten as a whole. So we take a look at their schedule going into 2020. And the Big Ten West, like it was last year, is relatively wide open again in 2020. But there's not that much competition within that division compared to the East Division of the Big Ten. So the schedule, not too difficult for Wisconsin here. Only a few games that will really pose as challenges for the Badgers. And right off the bat, they jump into Big Ten Conference play. Friday night, week 1, they host Indiana. And this is no pushover game. You know, years ago, you'd look at Indiana on your schedule and you'd say, that's a win. We're going to beat the Hoosiers, no problem. Not anymore. Not anymore. Indiana had an 8-win season last year. Great season for them, falling just short to Tennessee in their bowl game. Offensively, they were improving drastically. Very tough to stop offensively. If this game was at Indiana, some may be picking it to be a trendy upset in week 1 of the season. Of course, we're not predicting any games here. We're not predicting wins or losses. We're just analyzing the schedule. But a very intriguing Big Ten matchup to kick off the season. No room for error in week 1. No room to cakewalk through a FCS or cupcake opponent. Wisconsin's got to be on their A game right off the bat. They take care of Southern Illinois, we assume, in week 2. Appalachian State, certainly a team out of the Sun Belt you do not want to overlook. Certainly one that you cannot brush off and just, mark down as an automatic W. But there's a very good chance that Wisconsin could be 3-0 going into September 26th at Michigan. And I will tell you this, we look at the rest of the schedule here, it's not that daunting, it's not that scary, except for this 3-game stretch. This is the biggest stretch for Wisconsin football in 2020. And it will be the difference maker, and we've said this from multiple teams during these schedule previews, of whether or not they can win the Western Division, whether or not they, are Big Ten title contenders, whether or not they can finish 12-0 like the Football Power Index predicts with their early predictions. 12-0 for the Badgers, undefeated in 2020, they are predicting. The big stretch begins with this road game at Michigan where they annihilated the Wolverines, or they annihilated the Wolverines last year in Wisconsin, 35-14. Fantastic defensive performance, strong rushing game from Jonathan Taylor, one of the best performances of the year from him. He saved one of the biggest games of the year for the Badgers by taking down the Wolverines. And it was at that moment we knew Michigan's not going to really be a threat in the Big Ten this year. They're not going to be able to win the conference. That was an abysmal performance. Well, Michigan has this game circled on their calendar. It's taking place at about the same time it did last year. This time it's at the Big House. Michigan, like Wisconsin, is going to have a very solid defense, and there's a chance this game could be relatively low scoring, like we saw just a few years ago. I believe it was back in 2016 when Michigan beat the Badgers just 14-7. This game could be low scoring. It could come down to who's just going to be able to move the ball a little bit better, who's going to be able to force more turnovers. Home field advantage could play a huge role in this one. Obviously, the FPI projecting Wisconsin to beat the Wolverines, but with it being on the road, can never take that for granted, can never overlook that. They then get Notre Dame kicking off October in Green Bay, mind you, while it's still in the state of Wisconsin, so kind of a road game for the Fighting Irish. This game will be taking place at Lambeau Field, home of the Green Bay Packers, the legendary Lambeau Field. So this is going to be a fun game to watch. Regardless, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, fantastic football teams. Could be a top 10 matchup by this point in the season, depending on each team and how they're faring. This is going to be a fun one to watch. Notre Dame, we know they're an independent. Any chance that they have of making the college football playoff means they basically have to go undefeated, maybe 11-1. Non-conference game for Wisconsin, but this is big for them for one reason only. It's strength of schedule and a resume-boosting win if they can get it. So many years we've heard Wisconsin's strength of schedule is just not there. They don't have that many great quality wins. They don't have that many great opponents. Notre Dame is that team. Notre Dame is that team that if Wisconsin beats the Fighting Irish and then runs the table and finishes 12-0, that when the college football playoff committee is looking down the line, they'll say, all right, Wisconsin's got to win at a neutral site over Notre Dame, who at the time was more than likely a top 10 team. They would have a win on the road against Michigan. So this Notre Dame game, very, very intriguing just because of the location, just because of the contrast in style, as I expect the Fighting Irish to have a very solid offense this year, again, led by Ian Book, versus a Wisconsin defense that could be one of the best in the country yet again. So a very fun game to kick off the month of October at Lambeau Field. And then they round out this key 3-game stretch at home against Minnesota. This is a game that Minnesota certainly will have circled on their calendar. A game that's usually played later in the season. Not very characteristic to see it played so high up on the schedule. But last year, College Game Day went to Minnesota. The Big Ten West division was on the line. And Wisconsin surprised a lot of people by beating the Golden Gophers 38-17 to clinch the Western Division and go to the Big Ten Championship to face off against Ohio State. They stole it right from the Golden Gophers in their own house. The Western Division will not be on the line on October 10th, but there's certainly a revenge factor there for Minnesota. And they're a team that's going to be very talented yet again. Tanner Morgan, Muhammad Ibrahim at running back, Chris Ottman-Bell, Rashad Bateman. Very, very dangerous offense, especially in the passing game, going up against a very talented defense once again. Defense is going to be the theme for Wisconsin, as it's been for many years under Paul Chryst. So this 3-game stretch right here, huge for Wisconsin, but 2 of them are taking place in their own state. A true home game against Minnesota, a neutral site in the state of Wisconsin against Notre Dame. So there's a chance that Wisconsin could be 6-0, maybe 5-1, going into their bye week on October 17th. And then the rest of it is relatively smooth sailing. At Maryland, coming off a bye week. We expect Maryland to be a little bit better under Mike Locksley in year 2, but many thought Maryland was going to be a big threat last year after the start that they had. So it'll be interesting to see, how Maryland bounces back and if they can be a little more consistent across the board. But Wisconsin coming off a bye week here. Illinois at home. A scary matchup, and no pun intended for it being Halloween. But last year Wisconsin was 6-0. They were a top 6 team in the country. And Illinois, who I believe was 2-4 at the time, gave the Badgers their first loss of the season, winning 24-23 on a field goal as time expired. So Illinois now has to come into Camp Randall Stadium. You talk about revenge factor. Wisconsin will certainly want revenge on the Fighting Illini. But Illinois was a team that, after that win against Wisconsin, kind of took off, was able to make the postseason with Lovie Smith. So certainly not a team to be overlooked, a team that went into Michigan State, came back down 28-3, and won that game. So they're really not afraid of anybody. They beat Wisconsin once with Jonathan Taylor. They can do it again without him, regardless of the location. So Halloween matchup against Illinois, a revenge game for Wisconsin to try to avenge that first loss they were handed last year, and ultimately a loss that, when it happened, pretty much kicked them out of playoff contention, because that was a bad loss. At Northwestern, a team that Wisconsin beat 24-15 last year. Margin of victory probably should have been a little bit larger, considering how bad Northwestern was, but hopefully they will be bouncing back this year with better quarterback play. At Purdue, a team riddled by injuries last year. 45-24 victory for Wisconsin in 2019. Hopefully Purdue will not have to deal with all those injuries, be a little bit more healthy. Nebraska on November 21st. Wisconsin beat them 37-21 last year. And this is, of course, a make-or-break year for Scott Frost. I don't think he's necessarily on the hot seat per se. I mean, some might have him there. I don't think he's going to get fired if he has another subpar season, but it's been 2 years Nebraska hasn't been to the postseason. 4-8, 5-7 is 6-6 in store for 2020. Who knows? But Wisconsin gets to host the Cornhuskers, right before the season finale at Iowa. Big game, more so for Scott Frost than it is for Wisconsin. And then on the road at Iowa, last year's game was an absolute thriller. The Badgers squeaked that one out, winning 24-22. 24-22, this time having to travel to Kinnick Stadium. And just imagine the stakes of this game if, in fact, Wisconsin is 11-0 or 10-1. Going on the road to Kinnick Stadium against an Iowa team that, of course, we haven't predicted anything, but I would expect to win somewhere between 7 to 9 games in 2020. Of course, Kinnick Stadium, one of the most difficult places to play in the entire country. And if this game's at night, man, it's going to be tough for Paul Chryst' team to come in there and get the win. So when you look at the schedule as a whole, it's not that daunting. It's not that scary. I definitely view this Iowa game as a trap game. I view any team that has to travel to Kinnick Stadium in for some big-time trouble. Not many teams can go there and survive. So a big-time trap game against Iowa. And you obviously don't like that after this bye week, Wisconsin, in the next 6 games, has to play 4 of them on the road. 4 of their final 6 are on the road. Just luckily for them, 3 of them, with the exception of Iowa, are not against some of the elite opponents. This 3-game stretch, September 26th, October 10th, that will define the Badgers' season. Can they go 12-0? Can they go 11-1? Can they win the Big Ten West again? One thing's for sure, they're not in store for a letdown season like they had in 2018. They bounced back big time in 2019. I think they're in for even bigger things in 2020. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here at The Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to like this video, comment, and subscribe, and check out everything we have for you down in the description below. Exclusive college football news, content, and offers you do not want to miss, so do not miss out on it. Check it out right now. And once again, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time right here at The Gridiron Expert.